Welcome to the Liberal Europe podcast. I'm your host, Ricardo Silvestre, and thank you so much for listening to today's episode. And for today's conversation, we go back to Georgia and what is the struggle of Democrats, Europeists, and free people to have a better country, a better society, and to be able to achieve their own destiny, like, for example, joining the European Union or NATO. For that, I bring you Zaza Bibilashvili. He's the founder and chairman of the Shavshavadze Center. And we're going to talk about what is the state of play in Georgia and the opposition of people against the takeover of the country by the party Georgia Dream, but also the fight for maintaining a civic memory and increase the political literacy of Georgian. In this particular, for this conversation, with the help of this very important magazine called New Ivia. And after our main conversation, please stay to know a little more about Zaza and the work he does in Georgia. But now, with no further ado, I bring you Zaza Bibilashvili. I'm here with Zaza Bibilashvili. Zaza, thank you so much for coming to the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you here and for such an important conversation, but even a very important moment in your country. We've been following very closely what's happening in Georgia. So let's start there, Zaza. How are things there in your country, in the streets, in the political arena, in the think tank space like you are?
Thank you for inviting me once again. It's an honor to be connected to our liberal European family. Things are pretty rough, and I should say that the situation in Georgia is quite unique in many ways. Georgia used to be a showcase, a flagship of European integration in the region, of aspiring to be a member of the EU, of basically implementing all the reforms that were exemplary, not only for Eastern Europe and Caucasus, but also for other countries in former Soviet Union, in Central Asia and beyond. And now we are basically the last. Armenia, with all due respect to our neighbors, which was for a long time dominated by Russia, has managed to, or almost managed, and we wish them luck, has managed to rid itself of this burden and is moving with very fast and energetic steps towards Europe, towards NATO, and it's making progress with its neighbors, which has prevented it from the integration neighbors such as Azerbaijan and Turkey and others, while Georgia not only lags behind, but what we're hearing and what we're seeing in Georgia is surreal rhetoric from the government. It's not just anti-European, it's not just anti-Western. As I said, it's surreal. It's right out of Orwell books or Kafka novels. When people are being accused of things they have no idea they have committed, or they have no idea that may have been a crime at all. So situation is dire. Things are getting worse by the day. We're past the point when our friends and colleagues in the EU would say that we were just facing democratic backsliding. This is more like diving into an autocracy in a very, very short time span of 1 year. There used to be a time when society would discuss a new amendment to the law, which was not democratic, which would be conducive to some negative practices by the government. But now the laws are basically adopted wholesale, almost on a daily basis, without any public consideration, in an expedited manner, which make it prohibitive to live in this country if you are a democratically minded citizen, which is a great vast majority of Georgians. So just to give you the snapshot of what is life today in Georgia, almost all the opposition leaders are currently in prison. In addition to them, we have about 70 prisoners of conscience. These are young people who were arrested in the last few months and charged with all kinds of heinous crimes which they have not committed. And of course, in a very Soviet Russian style, the government always engages in a very successful whataboutism campaign. When they're asked and faced with these questions, they say, well, there are parties banned in Germany, and there are people arrested during protests in France. and there are opposition leaders who may be charged in other countries as well. So this is normal. We're also a democracy, which is also simply not true at this point, and I regret to say that, but it's not a democracy when every branch of the government, every municipality, the local level of the government, every branch of central government, the Supreme Court, the Constitutional Court, it is controlled by one political force, and I would even say by one rich person. That's Bidzina Ivanishvili, the billionaire who made his fortune in Russia, and the source of his fortune is still unknown. It's not like it's now popular to talk about the so-called tech billionaires in the U.S., but at least we know how some of these people made their money, or actually all of them, how they made their money, whether it's some, I don't know, some technological innovation, listing of their new idea on some stock exchange. So that's how they became billionaires. But in case of Bidzina Ivanishvili, his wealth comes from the 90s Russia. And again, nobody knows how it was generated. So this is a guy who runs Georgia. There was a point in our very recent history when our government was made up of people who were exclusively from Ivanishvili's family circle or his private corporations. So at some point, we had a health minister who was his family doctor. We had a prime minister who was his personal assistant for many years. We had the minister of economy who was his personal banker. We had the minister of state security who was head of his personal security unit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a situation which obviously cannot compare with any other country in Eastern Europe at this point. And the result is a very sad picture when a former frontrunner in the Eastern neighborhood, which Georgia was, is now on the verge of losing all progress that we have made over the last 2 decades.
You just mentioned the leader oppositions like Nika Melia, like Givi Targamadze, and also Zurab Yaparidze in jail. And actually, there have been reactions from the European Union. Renew Group and Alta Party condemned the arrest of Zurab. But how do you feel the net tightening? Is it a little bit of a reprieve now that these people are now, as you said correctly, so artificially put in jail and artificially charged, or is the government not yet happy with the repression?
The most important thing is that the government has basically made up its mind and it knows where it's going. It has basically left no option for itself. And the only option they're now facing is more autocracy, more repression, and basically stifling free voices in Georgia altogether. There are two reasons for this. One is an external reason, one is an internal reason. Let me start with the internal reason. The internal reason is the scale of corruption in Georgia, which is unprecedented. Everything that we used to say as civil society, as individual activists, as organizations, as investigative journalists, over the years, the government would say, well, that's of course all propaganda. That's not true. They're just false allegations. Now, unfortunately, Georgian Dream, which is this ruling party, feels so confident that it actually started repressions within its own ranks. And the stories that come out and the stories that are already in public are startling by the sheer scale of alleged corruption that they're dealing with. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in each individual case, which is unimaginable anywhere in the world, but particularly in a country like Georgia, which is tiny with population less than 4 million. So that's basically one reason, because they have set up a system which treats political opponents without any due process of law. So they have created precedents when a former mayor of Tbilisi went to jail for alleged corruption case, which was nothing compared to what we're facing today. And then you can go on and on, the cases of ministers, et cetera, et cetera. So if they were to lose power, which they should have faced in last October's elections, because they did lose, but refused to give up power. But if they do lose actual power, then they have to face their own system and their own precedents. That's going to be very difficult because they know what they have committed. In fact, they have admitted on air what I am saying. One of their chief propaganda operators is telling another one, uh, the evil things that we have done, he says, are so vast and so all concerning and all consuming that when people find everything out, then we're going to be in a really bad shape. And then this is out there, it's on YouTube, it's not an allegation, it's not something that somebody else said. So that's an internal factor. Basically, the amount and the scale of the wrongdoings and crimes and corruption inside the country. But more importantly, and this is something that we have talked about since 2011, 2012, is the Russian factor. Georgian Dream currently is basically a Russian hybrid force used to control Georgia. When people like myself, when my colleagues at the center and some others were saying 12, 13 years ago that Bidzina Ivanishvili, the oligarch that we mentioned earlier, was here to advance Russian political agenda, many in the EU would roll up their eyes and say, well, Georgians are always somewhat paranoid about Russia, and we're not really there, and Russia is not really a factor. But here we are, what we used to say years ago, now it's a self-evident truth. It's a fact, it's an axiom. It does not really need any other explanations or proofs. I mean, it's out there. So effectively, Russians have taken over Georgia, especially since advancing into Ukraine and attacking Ukraine 3.5 years ago. And it's very difficult to imagine how that will be reversed in the near future. They view this as their territory, which they have reclaimed. And I believe in the future, the Georgian case will be studied by political scientists, sociologists, psychologists, and politicians to see how a country can be taken over from within without most people realizing that actually a hostile power is taking over through vile propaganda, through very interesting and unfortunately successful hybrid means. I should say that propaganda has been cornerstone and the key to the success of Georgian Dream in this situation. A propaganda which allows them to say that, well, we're moving towards the EU, but unfortunately, EU is not what it used to be. This is what we're hearing from the ruling party. As if EU has left its foundational principles, but Georgian Dream is actually the true European value-based party.
But let's move now to the other reason to have you on the podcast, and that is to talk about the importance of having a place for sharing of ideas, to have open discussions, to talk about the future and democracy and liberalism and European Union. And we have one with New Iveria. I'm very privileged to have a small contribution on that publication. And thank you so much for the invitation. And then we're going to put the links on the podcast show notes. Tell us about New Iveria. Tell us about the importance of this publication for our listeners.
We started New Iveria in 2022. Our partners are Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom and the University of Georgia. And we have dozens and dozens of very esteemed intellectual contributors to this magazine. Thank you for contributing to the last issue, which is now in the print. The Chavchavadze Center views itself as a legacy of the first Georgian civil society organization created in the 19th century. At that time, in 1869, it was called the Society for the Spread of Literacy Among Georgians. And of course, at that time, literacy was an issue. It was a way of bringing progress, bringing economic freedom to people. Now, today, technically speaking, literacy is no longer an issue, but media literacy is. Dealing with disinformation is. Critical thinking is. Dealing with whataboutism and all kinds of information threats is a challenge. So New Iveria was created and was founded 3 years ago to deal with that threat and basically to create a new platform for exchanging ideas, for countering disinformation, and for basically making engaging the youth, because we also have the youth part of the magazine, special columns for the youth, and for transforming in the long run the Georgian society in a way which our northern neighbors do not want us to, which is fundamentally democratic, run from bottom up, with politics driven by demand, popular demand, and not dictated from the top. So this has been our vision, and we have pursued that vision for 3.5 years. The challenge is now to keep the magazine alive, because with with what we described at the beginning of this podcast, it's going to be increasingly difficult to continue publishing the magazine. We have already encountered severe problems in distribution, because all the distribution companies are simply afraid to carry our magazine. So we have to do this manually through our network of activists and benefactors and friends throughout Georgia, and through bookstores which are willing to take this risk. So we still have this network, and we still have the ambition and the vision of continuing with the magazine, but it's going to be increasingly difficult with GD planning to basically stifle free speech altogether by the end of 2025.
You anticipated my next question, which is, what is the mechanism for the survival, not only of the publication, but of the network that you established? For me, it's very comfortable. I'm in Lisbon, so I can write 5-6 op-eds, and I don't think Georgia Dream will be knocking at my door anytime soon. But that's not the same thing with an 18-year-old or a 45-year-old or a 60-year-old Georgian trying to give a contribution to a larger debate. So tell us a little bit about that. Because, again, the reason to have you also on the podcast is to mobilize our listeners and not only follow New Ivia, but to have any kind of help that we can give. So what help can we give to you guys so that you can keep this really important part of the larger struggle for a free Georgia?
Thank you for that question. That's a question we hear very often. How can we help you? And let me give you an easy answer. Easy answer in a way that it's something easy to be done. The best thing that you can do as Europe, as European Union, as Friends of Georgia, is not to give up on Georgia. Because right now, the principal goal of Georgia's enemies in the north is to change the way Europeans look at Georgia, and to plant a seed of doubt in European capitals, to say that, well, we don't like Georgian Dream, but Georgian Dream still gets some votes. So it must be that not all Georgian voters and not all Georgians want the EU. And maybe some of them really like autocracy. Maybe some of them like living without free speech. So this is a very organized, concerted campaign to create the doubt in European capitals. I'm not sure, I hope, and I don't believe it will be successful, but I have already heard some variations of this within diplomats and even within France, who may say that, well, you guys are doing a great job at New Ivia or the Chevchavadze Center and others at civil society organizations and the parties, but what about the overall picture? Is it more than a third of Georgians? Unfortunately, that's something that I've heard on more than one occasion. So my humble request would be, please don't be vulnerable to these propaganda messages that Georgians are not united in their wish to be part of united Europe, because there's nothing else that we want as much as a nation. Let me just put it this way: Georgian political DNA is defined by wanting to be part of Europe. Again, it's not the same as you mentioned Portugal and some other people in Brussels, etc. So people who are in Brussels or people who are in Portugal, you have the luxury of actually criticizing some policies, and that criticism may be absolutely legitimate. But for Georgians, it's a political and geopolitical and historical choice. And at this point, we don't have the luxury of concentrating on an individual EU policy. Basically, for us, it's a civilizational choice, a way of saying that we belong in a family of nations, which is called the European Union. And our history for the past few hundred years has been marred by the attempts, and has been full of examples of how Georgians are trying to strive towards Europe. But unfortunate reality was that there was a different situation in the world, and many in Europe were simply not ready to look at Georgia as part of European family. And when we speak with the youth, I often use the example of 1938, when after the Munich conference, Neville Chamberlain went back to London and spoke about Czechoslovakia as a faraway country that nobody really knows about. And of course, Czechoslovakia at that time was, today is a country in Central Europe. It's not even Eastern Europe, Czechia and Slovakia today. 80 years ago or 90 years ago, there was a faraway country, quote unquote. So now we have traveled a long way when people like Ursula von der Leyen are saying that Europe is from Lisbon to Tbilisi. And when German politicians are saying that Tbilisi, for the time being, is the capital of Europe because the fight for freedom is taking place on the streets of Tbilisi on a daily basis. Every day since November 28th, we have had people gathering on the streets of Tbilisi in other major cities protesting what we're seeing as democratic backsliding and authoritarian tendencies and basically takeover and hijacking of Georgian nation. So yeah, my humble request to be not to give up, because the window of opportunity will still be there. I don't know when. It may be this year, maybe next year, maybe 5 or 10 years from now. But we cannot afford the reality when if we knock again on the doors of EU, some European politician may say that, well, guys, it's too late. You've missed the boat, you've missed the train, and there's not going to be any more waves, any other waves of enlargement.
I'm actually very skeptical of that wave that could make both centrally in Brussels, the European Union, the European Parliament, or even locally in different countries, for us to start believing magically that Georgia people want to be a dictatorship under the Georgia dream. I don't think that at all. There could be naturally people that defend that either ideologically or because of economic issues, but the vast majority of people in Europe are with our friends in Georgia. I'm going to put the links on the podcast show, not only to Ivia, but again to the Shavachadze Center. I've been talking with Zaza Bibilashvili. Zaza, this was a privilege. Thank you so much for coming. Keep up the good fight, and we will be not only following your work, but helping as much as we can.
Thank you very much, and I look forward to our continued cooperation.
Zaza, tell us a little bit about yourself. What was the path that you took to the point that I have you now on the podcast?
I'm a lawyer by education. I graduated from Tbilisi State University. My first job was what I thought was a dream job at Georgian Mission to the UN many years ago in the 90s, which did not last for very long. Then I came back to Georgia and started private practice. I should say very successful one, because we were in a law firm associated with Anderson Legal, then Ernst & Young, then a law firm called BGI, which remains to this day a top-ranked law firm, international law firm in Georgia. But I decided to step into politics in 2013. That was a year after Georgian Dream came to power. And many people would ask me, what made you take this step? Because you're a successful lawyer, have everything going for you. Why would you create such a discomfort for you? In our part of the world, people usually quit the party which has lost the election and join the party which has won. And you did the opposite, actually. You quit or you actually joined a party which is now in the opposition. And my answer was very simple. I said, because behind Georgian Dream, I see very clearly the signs of Russia meddling into Georgia. And I see that Russia is trying to basically take our country away from its European course by planting these seeds of doubt and doing everything they were doing at that time, undermining our security system, prosecuting some of the soldiers who had fought in 2008 and who had countered the Russian special services in Georgia, etc., etc. So I was with the UNM for the following 5 years. For the last 2 years, I was deputy chairman of UNM. I left the party in 2018 to set up the Chevchavadze Center, together with my colleagues, most of whom have foreign policy background. Nino Kalandadze was the deputy foreign minister, Ekat Rashelashvili was a foreign minister, and there were a few other diplomats, intellectuals, and lawyers involved with the center. So we've traveled with Chavchavadze Center since 2018. That's 7 very eventful, very fulfilling years. When I said traveled, it can be also understood in an indirect way because it's been an adventure, but we've traveled throughout Georgia, all around Georgia, dozens of times, as one of our principal missions has been youth engagement. And basically teaching or preaching good citizenship to youth, especially in the regions of Georgia. So to summarize, 3 main things that we have done through Chavchavadze Center, apart from the new Ivia who embodies all 3, is our work on civic memory and disinformation. There we did we filmed documentaries. We created TV and radio content, which was used to counter the disinformation, the Russian disinformation in Georgia. The second principal area of our activity has been promoting the idea of internal party democracy. Many friends know that the Georgian party system is quite weak. And one of the reasons for this weakness is that Georgian political parties are run like limited liability companies by single or a single shareholder or maybe a couple of shareholders. Yeah. And that's not very conducive to creating chemistry with the voters and basically promoting the best to the top positions. So we have tried to tackle that idea, and I'm sure, and I'm very happy to say that it's been quite a success because the idea of intra-party democracy has taken foothold. And the third one is, as I said, is youth engagement. And this has been probably the most fulfilling part of our work in the last 7 years. We've toured the country dozens of times with some of the most popular classic movies and followed it up with discussions which sometimes lasted for hours and hours. I can mention the movies that we love to screen together with the youth in the regions. That would be 12 Angry Men, the classic American movie from 1950s. That would be also Rashomon, a Japanese classic from 1950, which is very fruitful to talk about the alternative realities that we face today in today's media landscape, and on and on and on. So this is what we've been doing. Unfortunately, the work of the Chavchavadze Center for now is almost halted because of what we discussed earlier in this podcast. Yep. The repressive laws that were adopted last year and earlier this year, make it impossible to continue functioning without the risk of people going to prison and without the risk of people being fined with prohibitive fines. So we're now in a position of basically surviving as individual democracy fighters and as groups connected to each other and networks of local opinion leaders. But when the work will be back on track as Chavchavadze Center, that remains to be seen.
This is all for now. I'll be back soon with more podcasts. You can always visit the website liberalforum.eu to know more about the activities of the European Liberal Forum. So until the next episode, let's keep making the world a better place.
You were listening to the Liberal Europe podcast by the European Liberal Forum. This podcast was co-financed by the European Parliament.